Hey, this is Dave with Taboo Customs. We are back working on our M715 project, and today we are going to be working on the front suspension. So let's take a look at the suspension system we're going to be using on this M715. All right, now if you've seen some of the other videos, you may already know, but this customer has decided to go with a GM 10 bolt front end and a 14 bolt rear end. Now this Jeep is not going to be driven a lot off-road, if any off-road, and really it may rarely see full drive. He's really mainly just going to drive it on the road and cruise around in it. So he's gone with the 10 bolt front end. Didn't need anything really that much heavier than that. He does plan on going away from the leaf springs and going to coil over. So with that, we have been putting together a 3-link front suspension for him. Now we looked at designing it ourselves, as we have designed several in the past, mainly with Cherokees and other Jeeps with Wranglers and whatnot. But with this, because time, this one's gone so long, we went ahead and said, you know what, we're just money ahead and time ahead to go ahead and buy everything we needed from Artec Industry. So we bought all of our track bar brackets, lower link and upper link brackets, all of the tube, all of the rod ends. Now I know you'll see these are somewhat rusty. That did not come from Artec that way. That was like that got like that here. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of water issues here in the last few weeks with about 10 inches of rain not long ago, which flooded the shop and has created some havoc with humidity issues. So we're still kind of dealing with some of that. So we've got all of our kits here, and we are also an Artec dealer. So if you're interested in these kits, you can get a hold of us and we can get you a price on those, or you could visit Artec as well and get you a price there. Anyway, so this is the plan for this suspension, is to use all of these kits. We'll basically be making the mounting points and getting everything set up and making sure we have all of the right geometry in there as we go through this, because even though we are getting all of these, we still have to make sure that we get it set up with the correct geometry. All right, so the first thing we had to get done is we had to pull the front axle. Now, since we already pulled the front axle whenever we did the steering box work, because we had to remove some brackets there, the front axle is already gone. Before we did pull that front axle though, we did take a plumb bob and checked where the center line of that front axle was and marked it on the frame. So as we go in and we set up our front suspension, we can make sure we keep that tire centered in that front wheel well and keep the wheelbase pretty close to the same as it was before. So now that that's done, we'll need to go in and we're going to go ahead, we're going to remove the cab, and with the 2-post lift here, it's going to be a lot easier. And the first time we've had a chance to do it with our lift, so I'm happy to do that. But we'll go in, we'll remove the cab, and then we will look at starting to get our alignment for our front axle and start to calculate some of those angles and some of that geometry, and we'll run through that after we get this cab off and we start to get that put together. All right, so now that we've got the cab off, our next step is going to be going in and cutting all of these old suspension brackets off that need to go. We're going to basically try to remove anything that we're not planning on reusing as we start to move towards our new 3-link front suspension. Then from there, we'll move into starting to tack together all of our brackets so that we can start mocking our suspension up and seeing what we've got. All right, let me show you why I stopped here. So, cutting down the brackets, I've actually moved back to this bracket here that held the original transfer case cross. Remember, you can see how it originally looked there. You can see I was cutting it down here because we're really just using the bottom part as a mount. We just need to gusset it up to the top of the frame. So, and I was trying to make clearance for our exhaust. Now, I plan on running 3-inch exhaust duals, but in looking at, of course, over here, sure, plenty of room. Over here, though, it's not going to fit. There's not 3 inches between the transfer case and the frame there. It's, yeah, nowhere really even close enough to even think about. I mean, I might be able to grind that side boss off, but still there's not enough clearance. It's probably going to hit when the motor torques, and it's not a good situation. So right now, the problem on this side though is that on this side I'm gonna have my upper link mounted over there, so I'm not gonna have as much room in here as I currently do. But we're gonna have to hope that maybe we can do crossover from the passenger side here and run both down this side, or we're gonna have to come up with something a little bit more creative. But it's kind of how these things go. Issues come up, we'll have to find solutions. So anyway, we're gonna keep cutting, basically somewhat set up our bracket over here, kind of like we did over there. And then we've got to cut a couple more mounts off on this side, and we can start looking at tacking together those brackets. All right, so we finished cleaning up the frame, which is the worst part. Well, I thought was going to be the worst part about today, until I got to start trying to put some of these kits here together. Yeah, so the issue I ran into is, so these are the links, and this is the standard way this kit comes. I don't understand it, but this is the link that comes with using 3/4 inch bolts, but all of the holes are 9/16 for all of the links, every one of the kits. So I get ready to email Artec, and I'm like, well, I better go and make sure I look in detail at the pages of the kits I bought. And yeah, it says at the very bottom, note, you're gonna get 3/4 inch bolts unless you tell us 9/16, and you're gonna have to drill them to 3/4 inch. It literally says that the standard way you're going to get it is 3/4, and you have to tell them if you want the smaller bolts that fit in the holes, or you're going to have to drill them. So honestly, yeah, at that point, I don't know why I necessarily bought the kit. I should have maybe just, so I'm going to spend the rest of the day drilling every hole in this kit and every hole in the rear kit. So if you're buying these Artec kits, watch out for that. But I gotta now get to drill in about, yeah, crap load of holes. All right, so we've got all of them drilled out. For us, you know, it actually didn't take that long, but we also have a large drill press. So if you don't have a large drill press, you're probably going to want to go with the 9/16 bolts. So keep that in mind if you're looking at buying one of these kits like this. Now we're getting ready to start tacking some of these together. You know, a lot of these are the brackets for under the frame for the lower links. These are the lower links on the axle side. These just get a little bracket tacked to the back right now. Doesn't really affect much, but we'll make sure that we have some space in there. This one gets welded. This little bracket here is separate. This one here is probably the most complicated. Right now we've got it clamped together. I did add some shims just to make sure we leave enough space in there for us to get the link in and out pretty easily. We've clamped it together, but we'll probably tack it up down here a few places and then take this, move it up. You can kind of see how it toes out here just to make sure we get the spacing even on all three of those holes. Now, what you don't see is you don't see our axle side of the track bar bracket. That's because that kit, when we opened it up, was quite rusty, and that was our fault for leaving it out here in the humidity for several months, unfortunately. So I've got it sitting in the evapor rust while we go ahead and get that cleaned up. So what I'm going to do is go ahead, start tacking these up, and then we'll start taking a look at our placement of the axle underneath the Jeep. Jumping ahead here, we've actually already got the suspension all tacked up. The link mounts are attached to the frame and attached to the axle. Basically what we did is we started by getting the axle into ride height location, located it across the Jeep, made sure that everything was correct with the axle, and then from there, you know, a lot of times with these suspensions, you're going to be limited by certain things. For us, we're kind of limited with how far back we could go with our upper link just because of the cross members, and we wanted to keep the upper and lowers relatively close in length, so that helped to basically kind of set the distances that we're going to use. The upper link a lot of times is going to be the big issue. For us, one of the big issues we had was this upper control arm mount here, and where our motor mount is for the engine. That's one thing that we're going to have to deal with. Obviously you can see that our exhaust is an issue, but with the exhaust we have a lot of flexibility in that we can, you know, swap out and run some different headers, route our exhaust differently, but exhaust is always one of those things you do have to consider, and that's one of the things that is going to be a little bit tougher in this build, because we are running 3-inch exhaust, pretty large exhaust. For instance, on this side probably shouldn't be an issue. However, on the other side, it will be really tight, so we might have to do something creative over there. But right now, in general, in a pretty good spot. The next step is actually we have our coilovers now. So we are working on getting our coilover set up. What we've done is we've basically made a jig that is essentially what the coilover length will be at ride height, and we'll use that then to actually go in here and go ahead and make our mounts for the coilovers, so we can go ahead and get those mounted. Getting to the climax of this video now, we have our coilovers installed. Now the coilovers we've gone with Fox Coilovers, tuned by AccuTune. This is the 2.5-inch diameter coilover with 14 inches of travel. Now with AccuTune, what you can do is you get a hold of them and you give them information about your vehicle, the weight of the vehicle, your ride height, the amount you want of shaft showing, the total travel you want, a whole lot of information. They'll basically custom tune these to you, and they come to you already then set. So essentially you'll be able to just install these, and that will give you a great starting point. And then once you get rolling with it, they also will work with you if there's an issue with spring rate or something like that. They're great to work with. So once we got our coilovers, once we got all of that determined, we pretty much knew what our ride height would be. And actually this is sitting at ride height right now with the weight on the shocks right now. And so we made up this bar that would essentially simulate that coilover at ride height, and we use that to be able to make our upper towers and do our lower mounting, so that we didn't have to reuse the shock constantly in and out of there to basically set some of that stuff up. So you can kind of see for our upper coilover mounting here, we've got a couple plates in here welded to the top, and then everything welded down to the frame. Now let's see our mounting below, and then we'll actually be putting plates on the top here and building a cradle that'll go across the top of the engine that then, these cylinders here will be mounted to get them up and out of the way, and also provide that support for the top of those coilover mounts, since they are so high on this truck. Now, one of the things that we were able to do that was very good for us as far as design, because we did have an issue, is once we did start to get this coilover mounting down here figured out, before we had all of this in here and knew where this would fall out, we actually had this tilted quite a ways out because we didn't know where it was going to fall. What we ended up doing is we got these plates in place, and we were able to come back in, cut off some of this bracket here so that it butted right up against that plate. You see we've got good clearance there with the shock, and then that helped to bring our track bar up out of the way. Now the big reason that was important is for our tie rod coming across here, when it was cranked down, clocked down quite a ways, it was going to come into contact with the drag link and the tie rod, so we got that up out of the way, which was a very good benefit for us, something that's helped out a lot as far as the design goes. Well, that'll do it for the first video here on our front suspension. We will be doing a second video where we'll be covering some of the other aspects of the front suspension, our front sway bar setup, our bump stop setup, our steering link setup as well. So be sure to check that out if you're looking for information in those areas. But if not, we appreciate you watching. And as always, a like or subscribe is greatly appreciated.